For the extra point, this is Erik McKinney here with Greg Katz. And Greg, we're going to talk a little USC recruiting. The last, or I guess 3 of the last 4 commitments, USC has flipped Philip Riley from Notre Dame. They flipped Josh Moore from Stanford and went into Florida to get 4-star tight end Michael Trigg. And Riley is from Florida and Moore is from Atlanta. So that's going into the SEC strongholds and getting a few guys where these were real recruiting battles that USC has won. Your take on kind of this recent surge from USC with recruiting?
Well, I say it's about time, and I'll tell you why. SC's had enough flips going the opposite direction. If you start off with Bryce Young, a whole year commitment going to Alabama. So what goes around comes around, I guess. You get a chance to, karma, the old karma comment. But let's take a look at this now. When I see a player flip, I want to know who he's flipping from to USC. You flip a player that's supposed to go to Notre Dame, you've got yourself a talent. Example, Marquise Stepp, he flipped from Notre Dame to USC. Okay, let's take the other position of guy going to Stanford. Under the David Shaw regime, they recruit good football players. Okay, one thing if you get a guy that was supposed to go to Stanford, he's going to be smart. He's probably going to be personable. He's going to be a lot of things that are going to be good both on the field and off the field. If you want to talk about Trigg, let's talk about Michael Trigg just briefly. Here's a guy that was recruited by Southeast Conference schools, okay, an ACC school. And you look at, okay, if Ed Ogeron is recruiting him, he's got to be good, right? Because Ed's not going to recruit dog meat players. So that's a big, big thing right there. South Carolina in its own way has a tradition, okay? But as you said, you're getting 3 players from the Southeast Conference ACC area that really to come all the way to the West Coast. I think the Trigg thing is the most intriguing to me because there's been a lot of speculation, criticism, if you will, that SC doesn't throw to the tight end, okay? Well, with Trigg, I know Trigg's going to play basketball for Andy Enfield, good. But you know what? He could play basketball at a lot of schools and play, both ways. But to come to Los Angeles, first thing I want to know, does he have family in Los Angeles to begin with? That's always a big recruiting thing with me. Why a player is considering, during the Pete Carroll era, I wouldn't question why a guy wants to go to SC, right? It was as good as it gets under Carroll. But under current circumstances, to get a player like Trigg to come to the West Coast to play tells me that they're probably going to try to push Trigg to be a catching tight end. He could be a wide receiver. He could be Michael Williams. He's 6'4", 215, 220. So what may sound as a tight end really becomes a split out tight end. And I would have no argument with that. But there's got to be something that he feels that he trusts in the coaching staff at SC that he's going to get the ball thrown to him one way or the other.
Yeah, I think going down into those states, into Georgia, into Florida, and getting guys, I think it's important. We've heard so much from this staff about take back the West and lock down Southern California and the West states. But that's important for USC. They need to get the best players from California. But just below that, it's important that there's still a national brand and that they still can go into Florida and they can still go into the East Coast or the Midwest and pull guys out of there. It's Alabama could recruit just in the SEC. They're still coming out to California and getting a Najee Harris and getting a Bryce Young. They still do that. And USC still needs to do that. You can't just hunker down and only recruit California prospects. And so far, they've gone into Texas, they've got a Nevada kid, they've got Washington kids, Florida and Atlanta and up into the East Coast here. And so I think that kind of shows what this USC staff can do as recruiters. And you mentioned too, staying on guys, recruiting throughout the entire process. When Michael Trigg initially releases a top 20 list, and has 20 schools kind of from everywhere on it, USC is just one of those. When they stay on it and now they're in the top 10 and now they're in the top 6 and now they're in the top 3 and they follow all the way through, it shows you kind of the relationships that they can build. and stay on a guy where, Alabama's involved and Auburn's involved and LSU's involved and South Carolina, LSU, South Carolina, USC being his final three. Boy, these are big recruiting wins, and this is kind of what this staff was brought in to do when it comes to recruiting. Go out and get guys like that. Now, talking about Trigg and tight end, it's really interesting talking to these tight end prospects, because the first guy they mention every single time is Drake London. And Drake London certainly listed as a wide receiver, but that's what the coaches, John David Baker, the tight end coach, and offense coordinator Graham Harrell, that's kind of what they pitch to prospects coming into play tight end. We want you to fill sort of that role and catch. I believe Drake London 39 receptions as a true freshman, a touchdown in each of the last 5 games. That's making an impact. Come in and do that, play that kind of role. And I think the idea would be to move around a little bit. But when you talk about tight ends, the number that gets brought up a lot is 15 total catches from guys listed as tight end last year. That's not what these recruits are hearing. That's not what the coaches are pitching in terms of come make an impact as a tight end for us. And so when a guy like Michael Trigg comes out, and USC already has a commitment from Lake McCree as a tight end in this 2021 class too, they're coming in to catch the ball. They're coming in to be a big part of this offense. So the idea that kind of the tight end doesn't exist, from here going forward in this offense, that's not really the idea. It might be called a big wide receiver or H-back or something like that. But obviously these tight ends are really buying into what they're hearing from these offensive coaches. And looking at Michael Trigg's film, he looks like maybe a mix between, he's always going to get the Mike Williams comparison being from Tampa and being that big receiver. He looks a little like Daniel Imatorbhebhe too, both in kind of his physical movements and his ability there. Certainly a high bar for him to reach when you throw out names like that coming into USC, but he gives you kind of that matchup nightmare as a guy that can move all over the offense. And so a big commitment for USC in a number of ways with what they want to do, both making an impact way out of the West and in Florida, and also bringing in a guy like that to this offense.
Well, I think there's so many positives to it. Just to deviate a little bit, since we are on recruiting, I got a chance to look at Jackson Dart. I know he's the quarterback that's kind of come out of nowhere that you wrote about recently in your recruiting roundup. And I'm watching him, and he reminds me of Keaton Slovis, except with a bigger threat to run the ball. And if I didn't know that he was from Draper, Utah, Corner Canyon, he could have been somebody that's coming out of Alamany, or he could somebody who's coming out of Santa Margarita, even maybe Mater Dei. And there's that thing where you say, well, he's from Utah, who do they play, yada yada yada. But hey, Jay Topelli was out of Utah, and he was an all-packed 12 defensive tackle first team. So you have to kind of project a little bit. But I actually was impressed with him. We don't know what's going to happen with Jake Garcia. Because we don't know what, I know he's ineligible at Valdosta, Georgia, but there's always been a question of, is he really 100%? And I'm looking at Dart, and the more I watch him, I go, you know what, this guy's not bad. He may not be. They thought Keaton Slovis was a throw-in. So, they're really, I think, doing a pretty good job of recruiting. And I think a bottom line to me is, we all know there's a lot of focus on Clay Helton. But in the eyes of a recruiter, kids that are being recruited, you know what they see? I'm a receiver, and Keaton Slovis is the quarterback. And look what he's done. They don't pay that big attention to, maybe like everyone else, to Clay Helton's situation. They look at Graham Harrell, and they look at a proven product, at least from a passing and catching standpoint. SC's got a lot to sell there. And I'm looking at Dart, and I'm going, you know what? I've seen film of Jake Garcia and all the others. And I go, if I didn't know this guy, like I said, was from Utah, he doesn't look like a 3-star to me.
Dart reminds me a little bit of Sam Darnold, with his ability kind of in the pocket to move the pocket, and then to make throws that all of a sudden the ball's out and you didn't expect him to throw it at all. He's rolling against his body, and also the athleticism to tuck it and all of a sudden he's 20 yards downfield. I mean, that's not really a combination you get a lot. I would expect whenever the updated recruiting rankings come out based on his year that he's putting together so far, I would expect to see a big jump for him. He has become one of the hot recruiting commodities in the entire West region with that senior year that he's put together. So again, a lot of kind of recruiting twists and turns, I think, still to come from this 2020 class. Already a number of prospects filling that out, but a full class for USC. And like you mentioned, now some intrigue at the quarterback position to finish off this 2020 group.